violent clouds swallowing the last strip of evening light. The winds pushed against the coast like a living creature, howling through broken branches and rattling abandoned fishing boats. Amid the chaos stood Ethan Ward, a seasoned search and rescue officer whose calm under pressure had earned him a reputation for being unshakable. But tonight, for the first time in years, his hands trembled. Not because of the storm, but because his partner, the one who'd been beside him through countless missions, was missing somewhere in the flooded forest. And Ethan wasn't going to leave without him. His partner wasn't a fellow officer in uniform. His partner was a dog, a Belgian Malinois named Shatter, a rescue himself who had become a hero more times than anyone could count. Shatter had saved children lost in the mountains, hikers buried under snow, and families trapped in wreckage. He was more than a dog. He was Ethan's compass, his anchor, and often, the only reason they made it out alive. Just an hour earlier, they'd received a distress call. A young girl named Lily had gone missing near the riverbanks. Her frightened brother reported that she'd been swept away by the rising water. Ethan and Shatter were the first team out. They followed her faint footprints until the trail disappeared into mud and debris. Shatter caught her scent and bolted ahead, faster than Ethan could follow. And then, a crack of thunder, a roar of water, and Shatter was gone. The rescue team called Ethan back to base, insisting the storm was too dangerous, that he should return and wait for daylight. But Ethan refused. Shatter would have never stopped searching for Lily. And Ethan would never stop searching for Shatter. Lightning split the sky as he pushed deeper into the woods, water rising past his boots. He shouted Shatter's name again and again, hoping for the familiar bark in response. Nothing. Just the storm. Just the crushing worry that felt like it was tightening around his lungs. He stumbled and fell when a tree limb crashed nearby, and for a moment, he stayed on the ground, soaked and exhausted. He thought of all the times Shatter had pulled him out of danger: the avalanche in Montana, the wildfire in California, the collapsed barn in Kansas. Shatter always found him, even when the world seemed to be falling apart. So Ethan stood again. He owed Shatter the same. Then, faintly, he heard it. Not a bark or a whine. A cry. A child's cry. He pushed through the thorny brush toward the sound, slipping on wet roots and nearly falling again. When he reached the small clearing at the base of the old river bridge, he froze. There, huddled inside the hollow of an overturned tree trunk, was Lily, shivering, frightened, and clinging to the thick fur of the dog lying beside her. Shatter. He wasn't moving. Ethan rushed to them. Lily looked up with tearful eyes. "He saved me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I slipped into the river. He pulled me out. He wouldn't leave me." Ethan's throat tightened so hard he could barely breathe. Shatter lay there, soaked and limp, his chest rising only the slightest bit. His eyes were barely open, but when they met Ethan's, there was recognition. Loyalty, apology, and something else: relief. "You held on," Ethan whispered as he knelt beside him. His voice cracked. "Good boy, I'm here." He wrapped his jacket around Lily, lifted her into his arms, and looked down at Shatter. The dog tried to stand, but his body collapsed under him. Ethan set Lily down and gently slid his arms under Shatter's body. "Please don't die," Lily pleaded softly, sobbing. "He saved me. He can't die." Ethan swallowed the ache in his chest. "He's the strongest one of us," he said. "He's going to fight, right, buddy?" Shatter's ear twitched faintly, and Ethan took it as a yes. The trek back through the storm was brutal. Every step felt heavier. Shatter's breathing worsened, and Ethan could feel the dog's heartbeat, rapid and uneven, against his arms. Lily stayed close, gripping the hem of Ethan's shirt, her small body shaking from cold and fear. Ethan shielded them both from falling branches and rushing water, pushing through the forest with a determination he didn't know he still had. By the time they reached the rescue trucks, medics rushed Lily inside and wrapped her in blankets. Ethan laid Shatter gently onto the back seat of his truck. The vet had been called and was on the way, but the storm delayed everything. Shatter's breaths grew shallow. Ethan sat beside him, one hand on the dog's head. Rain drummed on the roof. The world outside was chaos, but inside the truck, it felt eerily silent. "You saved her," Ethan whispered. "Just like you always do." Shatter's eyes closed for a moment, then opened again slowly, as if he were trying to stay in the moment just for Ethan's sake. You remember that day I found you? Ethan continued, tears gathering despite his effort to stay strong. You were terrified, hurt. Everyone said you'd never trust anyone again, but you trusted me. And I promised I'd protect you. Shadow's breathing hitched. And now look at you, Ethan whispered. You became the bravest soul I've ever known. When the vet finally arrived, she moved quickly, checking Shadow's pulse, his temperature, the cut on his side, the bruising along his ribs. He's fighting, she said softly, but he's exhausted. Hypothermic. He needs a clinic. Warmth, fluids, oxygen. There's a chance, but we need to move now. Chance. The word stung, but it was enough for Ethan. They sped through flooded streets toward town. Ethan kept his hand on Shadow the entire time. Stay with me, he whispered. We're almost there. When they reached the animal clinic, staff rushed Shadow into the emergency room. They closed the doors, and Ethan was left standing in the hallway, soaked, cold, and feeling more helpless than he ever had in his life. Lily's parents arrived minutes later, crying and thanking Ethan for saving their daughter. But Ethan kept glancing back at the door, waiting for someone to come out. Waiting for anything. After what felt like hours, the vet stepped into the hall. Her expression said everything. I'm so sorry, she whispered. He held on longer than any dog I've seen. He must have loved you very much. The world tilted. Ethan's breath left him. His knees nearly buckled, but he nodded, swallowing the pain that felt like it was tearing him apart from the inside. Shadow had saved one last life. And he had given everything to do it. Lily approached him slowly, still wrapped in a blanket, her cheeks stained with dried tears. She held something in her small hands, not a toy, not a note. It was Shadow's search and rescue tag, the one that had been clipped to his vest since the day he earned it. He dropped this when he pulled me out, she said. I think he'd want you to have it. Ethan knelt and took the tag with trembling fingers. The metal was scratched, dented, and soaked, but it was the most precious thing he had ever held. Thank you, he said softly. Lily hugged him without hesitation. A simple, pure gesture, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was still kindness, still connection, still humanity. In the days that followed, stories of Shadow's final rescue spread across the community. People lit candles outside the clinic. Children drew pictures of Shadow with wings. Letters poured in, messages of gratitude, sympathy, and awe. One letter stood out. It came from Lily's family. It read, "He saved our daughter, but he also saved us. In the darkest moment of our lives, he reminded us what love looks like. We will never forget him." Ethan kept Shadow's tag in his pocket, rubbing it whenever he felt that wave of grief creeping in. And each time, he remembered something vital. Shadow hadn't died in fear or loneliness. He had died doing what he lived for, helping others, protecting the vulnerable, showing courage where most would have run. Weeks later, the search and rescue department held a ceremony in Shadow's honor. Ethan spoke last. Shadow wasn't just a partner, he said. He was a reminder of who we're supposed to be, kind, brave, selfless. He didn't measure life by how long it lasted, but by how much good he could do with the time he had. If we lived even a little more like that, if we showed a little more compassion, a little more courage, maybe the world would look more like the one he believed in. People cried, people smiled, and for the first time since that night, Ethan felt something loosen in his chest, not the absence of loss, but the presence of something greater. Hope. Shadow's legacy lived on in every rescue, every person inspired by his story, every act of kindness that rippled outward. And though Ethan carried the pain of losing him, he also carried something else, gratitude. For the years they had, for the lives they saved, for the love that didn't vanish, even when Shadow did. In the quiet moments, when the day was done and the world felt still, Ethan would look at Shadow's tag and whisper the same words he said on that stormy night, the ones Shadow held on for. I'm here, I always will be, and in his heart, he felt it. Shadow was still there, still guiding him, still inspiring him, still teaching him the power of selfless love. In the end, what shattered Ethan wasn't the loss, it was the realization of how deeply one life, even a canine one, could change the world. And what healed him was knowing that Shadow's final act wasn't just a rescue. It was a reminder to humanity. Be brave, be kind, and never stop showing up for those who need you.